kick off now with the first part of it, which is human origins. And we'll start with the fact that the Bible says that in the beginning, you've all heard this, was the Word. But in order to explain everything that followed after that, the Word would have to be something on the order of this, if you can see it. Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. It had to be a heck of a word to cover all that has since eventuated. Over time, the creationists changed it, they expanded it a little bit to 3 words. God did it. God did everything. And that's all you needed for an answer. Why does it rain? God did it. Why does the wind blow? God did it. Everything, God did it. And that worked for a couple thousand years. A couple thousand years, that was all you needed. But then 145 years ago, a new group of people came on the scene, the Darwinists, with what they thought was a better, more rational explanation, which is that nature did it. Don't need God, but nature, and nature only, did it. And there was a line drawn down the middle. God here, nature here, and no mixing. No mixing. 145 years. And then the creationists tried an end run by bringing in a group of much smarter individuals, much better educated than the original ones, and they are called intelligent designers. Intelligent designers. But still, basically, God is at the bottom of their theory as well. God did it. Everything is so complex it couldn't have happened by accident. Therefore, God had to do it. Only recently has a much smaller group of individuals started putting forth a theory called intervention. I'm one of those. I'm an interventionist. And what we say is that it wasn't a God with a capital G, an anthropomorphic God. It was a group of gods, multiple people, multiple beings, small g gods. And that they did it. That's our mantra. They did it. Not God did it, not nature did it, they did it. And that accounts for everything in its own way that has come to be on the earth. And that's what I'm going to be showing you here, basically, tonight. In my beginning, next slide, please. In my beginning, the book, Everything You Know Is Wrong, which is not here. You can't get it. We tried to ship it here, and it didn't work out with the publisher. A lot of problems. Australia, a long time, etc. You will be able eventually, if you wanted to get it through Duncan Rhodes' Nexus magazine. So if you want, keep in mind. If you want to order it from the States direct, go through Barnes & Noble. Barnes & Noble has the best shipping rate, www.bn.com. Barnes & Noble. All right, what I try to show in the cover here is the interventionist point of view boiled down. That the gods, multiple gods, small g, handed the spark of human life to the primitives that were on the earth at the time by means of intervention via genetic engineering, which is symbolized by a test tube. That is the theory. We are genetically engineered species, product, and we'll talk about that as time goes by. Next slide. In the beginning, boy, every one of these is apparently going to be cut off at the top, and I'm sorry for that. I don't know how to fix this. But in the beginning, what you have is the cloud. So in the Bible's beginning was the Word, in my beginning was the book, and now in the beginning was the cloud of dust and gas swirling around and over about 10 billion years down to about 4.5 billion years ago, when the solar system took the shape basically that we know now, and the Earth was basically coalesced out of the cloud as the proto-Earth. Next slide. And at that proto-Earth, 4.5 to 3.5 billion years ago, the proto-Earth was just a seething mass of magma being bombarded by asteroids and meteorites. It was just an impossible place to live, as you can see. Next slide. Then as it began to cool off over time from 3.5 to around 2.5, the next billion years, we have cooling enough to where you would have incipient land beginning to show, but still it's mostly molten lava, but at least the bombardment of meteorites and all that stopped. Now, no one would have thought at one time that life could have begun on Earth at a time like this. So the theory was that life didn't begin until around 2 billion years ago when it was cooled off enough to have water at least, and that inorganic molecules were somehow swirled together and became a living thing. Nobody quite understood, but since nature was at the core of everything according to the Darwinists, it had to happen. It just had to happen. They couldn't quite figure it out. Didn't matter, we'll figure it out. They kept assuring everybody, we'll figure it out. And then about 30 years ago, that was what they taught, it's what all you were taught, it's what your kids are being taught today, what your grandkids are being taught. But about 30 years ago, they found out that, in fact, life had already come to Earth around 4 billion years ago. Next slide. Back when it was seething magma, you saw what it looked like, and everyone pretty much agrees that's what it was. This is what came. Prokaryotic bacteria. Now, if the beginning of life, incipient life, had really started the way they say, it would have been something extremely simple, kind of like a virus. It would have been about the size of one of these little spots in here, like this. Instead, it's this really large, complex, kind of one single-cell bacteria called a prokaryotic bacteria. Now, the one thing that distinguishes it is, though it has a number of DNA strands, it doesn't have a nucleus. The DNA is not held within a nucleus, it kind of floats free and loose. That's what distinguishes prokaryotic bacteria. And it came at about 4 billion years ago, only about a half a billion years from when the Earth was first beginning to coalesce out. So it's extremely unlikely that, in fact impossible, that life formed on Earth. It came here whole and complete. Why? Because it didn't come in only one form. There are two types of prokaryotic bacteria, the archaea and the true bacteria. Two types, distinct, different types. So it absolutely is for certain that life came here. Now the question really is, how did it get here? Was it directed here? Was it sent here? Was it delivered here on purpose? Or did it just accidentally show up somehow? That is the question that has to be answered now. Now, for the prokaryotic bacteria, the thing you need to keep in mind about it is indestructible. Indestructible. That's what's so cool about it. The Earth got what it needed exactly when it needed it. When it was just beginning, if you want to turn a planet into something that can support higher life forms, you've got to give it something that will churn the environment and turn oxygen loose in the atmosphere and in the water to tie up the free iron, to turn the iron into rust, iron oxide, and then have an excess of oxygen so that higher life forms can live on that place. Exactly what the Earth needed, which are these creatures right here to do that, they got. Early on, two forms, all of them indestructible early on. Pretty neat. What an amazing coincidence. An amazing coincidence. Next slide. Okay, and 2 billion years ago, remember we've gone now 2 billion years approximately, 4 billion years with the prokaryotes, 2 billion years with the prokaryotes from 4 billion years. Just those two kinds, and then suddenly at around 2 billion years ago, these things appear out of nowhere, just like the prokaryotes did. Out of nowhere come the eukaryotes. You have strata without, and suddenly you have strata with. And here they are. And they're extremely complicated, hundreds to thousands of times larger than the prokaryotes, with a nucleus surrounding many, many, many more strands of DNA. This is a sophisticated, yet still one-celled creature, pumping out much more oxygen, much more efficiently. But they couldn't come any sooner because the Earth wasn't prepared. These are fragile. These are not indestructible. These are destructible. So they couldn't come until the Earth had been fixed to a certain extent by the prokaryotes. 2 billion years of prokaryotic activity allowed these to appear. And when they do appear, the Darwinists went with the prokaryotes. They can argue that, well, they came from, maybe space, from a meteorite or something like that. But the eukaryotes have to be explained in practical terms. And what's the only way that could have happened if you don't see any transition from prokaryotes to eukaryotes? I mean, from no nucleus to a nucleus, from none of this to all of this, how did it happen? What they say is this, get it, that after a couple of billion years of living side by side, the larger prokaryotes suddenly decide to eat some of the smaller prokaryotes, and instead of becoming food, the smaller prokaryotes changed their physical structure into all these different things, including the nucleus of the eukaryotes. That magically, somehow, they cannibalized each other, and it worked, and a new, much more sophisticated living thing came to be. And for as absurd as it sounds, it's gospel among biologists. It's ridiculous, but it is accepted. Next. Now, this is how they say it happened. These turned into all this. It didn't. It's ridiculous. Next slide. After another 1.5 billion years, from 2 billion years to around 560 million years ago, just round it off to 500 million, give or take. Another 1.5 billion with the prokaryotes and the eukaryotes pumping oxygen into the atmosphere, tying up the iron, making iron oxide, and having an excess of oxygen. Suddenly, out of nowhere, you have the seas filled with creatures. This is called a Cambrian explosion, and it's exactly what it was. Thousands of species of animals and plants, none of them looking anything like anything we have on Earth today, except the horseshoe crab. That's the only thing that's left, and it looks kind of like this, maybe the descendant of this one. Other than that, they don't look like anything we have today. And yet it came out of nowhere within about a 5 million year period, which is an idling compared to all the billions of years that have come preceding that. The Cambrian explosion, boom, there it all is. All 26 animal phyla that we have today came